For the last talk of the day, we have a speaker who brings over a decade of industry experience, having led engineering teams at Google and deployed software to billions of users through platforms like Windows and Android. His expertise spans technical outreach, responsible AI development, and foundation models as part of Google's Responsible AI team. Please join me in welcoming Oscar, who will be presenting on the latest additions to the Responsible Generative AI Toolkit. The stage is all yours, Oscar.
Thank you, everyone. It is great to be back here. Just big thank you to all the organizers. You do a fantastic job, Luke, Ishan, and the whole team. So yeah, just very happy to be here and see all the familiar faces. So today we're going to talk about what's new in the Responsible GenAI Toolkit. And that sounds like a mouthful. I am Oscar. I'm part of the Responsible AI team. I already got introduced, so I won't spend too much time here. We only have about 15 minutes. This is a lightning talk, but I'm going to hit you so hard and so fast, it's going to be done in 5 minutes. So a bit of a refresher. If you don't know what the Responsible GenAI Toolkit is, let's take a step back and let's think about your typical AI application. And by typical, I mean, the last 6 to 12 months, pretty recent development. You have your AI model at the core of your application, or this one of the parts of your application that is using AI as one of the core components. You have some pre-trained model that has been trained using some pre-trained data. And then you do what is called responsible generation. We'll go into more details a little bit later. On both sides of your model, you have what are called safeguards. First, on the input side, when the user is actually bringing in some kind of prompt, even if it's not completely user-generated, it has some form of user feedback. Otherwise, we will all be getting the same responses, right? So you're getting something from the user that then gets translated into a prompt. In that process, you apply some form of safeguards. That prompt goes into the AI model, the LLM, and then the LLM produces some kind of output, and then that output can also go through another set of safeguards. And this whole process at the end, once you have the output, you should always try to strive for providing for the user some mechanism, some affordance to be able to provide feedback back into your application. If you are in the model development business, then you can use that to later retrain your model. Otherwise, you can at the very least look at some failure modes and potentially improve some of your safeguards or some of that responsible generation. And this whole picture is what responsible GenAI application looks like. The Responsible GenAI Toolkit aims to provide us developers with a collection of tools and resources to help us make sure that we use AI responsibly in accordance to what this picture is representing. So going into a little more detail, I think we can categorize what the GenAI Toolkit gives you into 3 separate things. First, it gives you resources for you to learn what responsible AI is. We provide RAI, there's responsible AI guidance, and we also provide a collection of code labs. Those are self-paced tutorials that you can actually step through and learn about how some of these technologies work. Then we provide you with ways to protect your application. These are some of the safeguards that we mentioned earlier, but we also have a thing called model alignment. We'll discuss that in a little bit. And then lastly, we allow you to iterate. Once you have provided the user with these models, you can fine-tune how this works through prompt debugging and also through safety benchmarking. So what are the content safeguards? There's 2 flavors here that are provided by a toolkit. First, we have a thing called agile classifiers, and then we have a thing called shield gemma. These are policy-driven content filtering. On one end, you have as the inputs the user or the model-generated content, and then as the outputs, it is simply a thumbs up or thumbs down. Does this comply with the policies or not? So agile classifiers is all news. That was one of the first additions to the toolkit. But Shield Gemma is not. This was a recent release as of about 2 months ago. And what it does is strictly content policy safety checks, and it supports 4 kinds of harms, one being harassment, hate speech, dangerous content, or sexually explicit content. What is Shield Gemma? It is a fine-tuned version of Gemma 2. We have 3 different variations for the 3 different sizes, 2 billion parameters, 9, and 27. And the idea is that you can pick and choose which ones you want to use for your application. You essentially do one at a time. And how this works is that you create this prompt using some pretty basic string templating, and then you insert either the user input or the user input and the model output, and then you say which one of the policy safety checks you want to provide, and then the model will say simply yes or no. That's all it does. On the responsible generation side of things, we have 3 tools. We have LIT, which stands for the Learning Interpretability Tool. We have Model Aligner, and then we have the LLM Comparator. All these 3 are new tools as of the last 2 months. So what is LIT? Well, we already had LIT, but what is new in LIT is that we now have a pre-built Docker image available, so you don't have to build this from scratch. And we have updated the code lab that shows you how you can deploy this pre-built Docker image on cloud using GPU-backed resources. What I like LIT for is to be able to do some pretty quick iteration on picking and probing what the model is doing. It does some relatively advanced stuff. The main one that we like to talk about is sequence saliency analysis. That is when you write a prompt and you look at the output, you can highlight specific parts of the output, and then the tool will highlight which parts of the prompt have the most weight when it comes to providing those outputs. So you can actually see what comes from where and assign some kind of weight to, okay, so it got it wrong here. So if I highlight this part of the output, turns out that it was this part of the input of the prompt that caused that failure. Another thing that it does that I didn't list here is, for instance, counterfactual generation. If you're not familiar with that, it's a relatively advanced concept when it comes to responsible AI. The idea is that you can swap different parts of your prompts or your inputs to change different entities to see how the model behaves. Think, for example, different age groups or different demographics that you can swap to see how the model behaves. Model Aligner. This is just as the joke goes, it's just LLMs all the way down. What you do is that you use LLMs to optimize the prompts for other LLMs. It works in a pretty interactive way, even though what we provide is a pip package. I actually played with it a little bit and created my own command line tool. How it works is that you start with some kind of prompt, and you have some variable, and then you ask the model to provide an output. For example, you may say, give me a recipe for X, and then you swap X for, say, fettuccine Alfredo. And then the model is going to give you an output. And then you don't like the output. You say, well, you should probably list allergens as part of this recipe. So then you're going to use the judge LLM to tune the prompt for the target LLM, and you're going to see the prompt changing. For instance, it's going to say, provide a recipe for X, and also list all allergens. And then it's going to tell you the allergens, and then you're going to look at it and say, that is a little too long. Make sure that the recipe, number 1, lists, say, units, and it is short enough to fit in a Post-it note. And then you go so on and so forth until you're happy with your output. What is cool about this is that you can actually use a much bigger LLM to optimize your prompts, and you can maintain a very small LLM for your actual application that has some pretty good performance considerations. So you can actually use the power of a big LLM, but at the same time, whatever you deploy to the users is only as small as you need. That's going to help you save a lot of money and a lot of time later. Then we have LLM Comparator. This is actually a really basic, really simple tool, but it is extremely useful. What this is trying to do is allow you to see side-by-side comparisons of the same prompt, Model A versus Model B. Once again, it is LLMs all the way down. Another cool thing that this does is that we can add another layer of LLMs. This can also be a bigger, more advanced LLM that's going to do the judging for yourself. So you have prompt, output from Model A, output from Model B, and then you're going to have the LLM judge that's going to determine which one is better, and it's going to tell you why. So that's going to allow you to do what we call what I'm calling an informed decision for model upgrades. Because it's not so simple as, well, we had Gemma 1, and then Google released Gemma 2. Surely has to be better, right? So we just flip the switch, and off we go. Well, not so fast. If you have an application that has some pretty specific requirements and you have some pretty specific prompts, you may actually want to make an informed decision here. So LLM comparator is empowering you to be able to go from model A to model B, and you can see for yourself specific scenarios and specific cases where you can compare A to B. This works for obviously open models, but you can actually use any model you want. You can even go from proprietary model A to proprietary model B. And one thing to note as well is that the judge part does not have to be LLM. If you have the resources, and it can actually be human provided, and you can have a whole bunch of people that go and look, and they can tell you if they prefer A or they prefer B. So that is most of it. That's actually what is new in the Responsible GenAI Toolkit. But I encourage you to go and see for yourself. You can go to this website over here and see what we got cooking. But that is all I have for you today. Thank you, everyone. I'll take any questions now.
Criteria are the two models compared? Can you hear me?
I can hear you,
Yeah.
The criteria, you can either tweak the prompt. So are you talking about the automatic part?
The comparator, yeah.
Yeah, so you can, I think the basic prompt is actually very simple. It's saying, here's the initial prompt, and here's output of model A, here's output of model B. Tell me which one is better and why. And we actually run that. You can tweak this, of course, but run it, I think it's 3 to 5 times. And then it's going to look at the average, and it's going to give you some chart, and it's going to tell you model A is trailing model B by 75%. Oh. But this is all tunable. You can actually, as a user of this, you can say, and not only judge it based on this, but also prefer a shorter response, for instance.
Also, the thing that is comparing the two models is also an LLM.
So that's the part that you can actually change. This is LLM. The input to LLM comparator is a JSON file, and how you populate this JSON file is entirely up to you. What I just described is called LLM as a judge. So you actually provide a second LLM, or I guess a third LLM, model A, model B, and the judge LLM, to judge between the two. And just like we did with Model Aligner, a really cool trick you can use is that you can use a bigger LLM to judge between the two, Model A or Model B. Because even though it may be more expensive and slower, it is a one-time thing as opposed to what you deploy to your end users.
By big, you mean a larger number of parameters, right?
Larger number of parameters or just a more advanced model?
Smarter, yeah. Thank you.
So over here.
Hello. My name is Ant. I'm currently studying second year computer science at UNSW. So my first question was for sequence saliency analysis, does it work for other languages, more niche languages that are not English, or let's say Bengali or some other languages that the model the data isn't publicly available that much. So would it work for that as well?
That is a great question. This is a mathematical operation. Mm-hmm. It is language independent. We're looking at input tokens, output tokens. Mm-hmm. As long as the response is sensible and the model is able to produce output in some language, mm-hmm. we can look at the gradients. That's how it works. We're looking at the gradients at each time step. And once we look at the gradients, we can see which tokens as part of the input had the most weight on the specific part of the output that you highlighted. Mm-hmm. There's no language involved. It's just mm-hmm. tokens.
So it's basically just probability, right? It's just looking at the probability matches of the input and the output.
Not the probability, the gradients.
Gradients, sorry. Yep. Have you read the Anthropic's the Golden Gate Bridge paper for the interpretability paper on the Golden Gate Bridge?
Which year is this? Which year?
2024 or 2023. It's basically it's similar to what sequence saliency analysis is doing. It's looking at each of the word and trying to match why did the model come to this particular output, or why did it use it? So.
That sounds very familiar. Okay. But yes, the proper term for this, and again, it's just fancy words, is sequence selection analysis, all we're doing is looking at the gradient to determine which parts of the input had the most say in the specific part of the output that you highlight. The novel part of this methodology is that you can look at individual tokens, sentences, or the entire paragraph. You can actually basically click and drag and highlight.
Also, like second question, like do you have any advice for like someone like me, like undergrad, wanting to go into responsible AI research?
Get started with your own work and start learning on your own and start contributing whatever you can. There's a strong shortage of people with actual technical knowledge of responsible AI. I feel like the main reason why I'm here is I want to make sure that we all understand that this is an engineering discipline and not just some marketing term. I feel like the existence of responsible AI implies that there's some irresponsible AI out there, but the reality is that I have not yet met anybody that wants to do irresponsible AI. It's just that there's a lack of understanding and a lack of knowledge. So I think that right now there's a pretty big opportunity for people to fill that gap of responsible AI from an engineering first principles. And I think that there's going to be plenty of opportunities there in the short, medium, and long term.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for the questions, and thank you, Oscar. It was very insightful to know about integrating AI in a very safe and ethical manner.
Thank you, everyone.